everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Alsop, and together with Lucy, I'm the committee member who is responsible for our webinar programme. So apologies for a slight delay in the start. We had a few technical hitches, but I'm sure you're all familiar with those. So let's move on. So this morning, we're delighted to welcome Rebecca Cole, who is CEO of Cobalt Sky and also MRS Chair-elect, and she will be our panel host for a discussion on the state of the Insight Nation. Rebecca joined Cobalt Sky, an award-winning market research operations company, in 2006. She has served on the main board of the Market Research Society since 2020 and will be assuming the role as chair in April 2026. She is a highly experienced web scripter and quantum programmer. Rebecca is also co-chair of the Association for Survey Computing. Rebecca is going to very soon be introducing our three panel members who each represent different parts of the market research universe. And together they're going to be looking back on 2025, sharing their thoughts on some key topics that have emerged and hopefully making some predictions for 2026. As usual, there will be an opportunity for you to join the discussion and ask your own questions of the panel at the end of the session. So when the time comes, please turn on your webcams, raise your hand and ask your questions yourself, or if you'd rather not, then type your question in the chat box and I'll read them out for you. Okay, so we're very grateful to our sponsors, Live Minds, for this session. Live Minds' mission is to give every company access to powerful qualitative insight. So thanks to Live Minds for sponsoring this. And then before I hand over to Bex, Lucy asked me to remind everyone of two more ICG events that are coming up soon. So we've got our members-only speed networking event tomorrow at 1 p.m. and also the ICG's annual quiz night in London on the 5th of February, which is open to all. So now I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Rebecca. And hopefully be able to hear you, Rebecca.
Yes, so I'm afraid, everyone, I'm the one who was guilty for this late start. I've been told that my microphone is a bit quiet, so I'm going to try and project, but apologies that I am a bit quiet. We are aware of it, but it's mostly not about my talking anyway, so hopefully it won't cause much issues. So, as Sally said, to begin with, I've just been asked to spend a couple of minutes reflecting on last year and looking ahead to this year from an MRS perspective before I go on to introduce our fantastic panelists. 2025 was a year of acceleration, but also of reflection for our industry. We've seen remarkable momentum around technology, particularly AI, not just as an efficiency tool, but as something that's genuinely reshaping how insight is generated, interpreted, and acted on. But it's also a year that sharpened the focus on what really matters: quality, transparency, ethics, and public trust. It's really important to MRS that we are championing progress and we're embracing opportunities that technology can offer, whilst also upholding the standards and principles that make research credible and valuable. Some of you may have seen the recent announcement of the new MRS president, Baroness Deborah Mattinson, very exciting. And she's already stated that, in her opinion, AI is not something that we should simply go with the flow on, but is a chance for our industry to swim upstream, to create more space for thinking, strategy, and considered delivery. She's been very clear that as technology accelerates, relationships matter more than ever, and that we have a collective responsibility to call out snake oil AI practices when we see them in order to protect trust in insight and in our profession. Throughout 2025, we've also seen increasing pressure on budgets, on time, changing client expectations, alongside growing demand for insight that genuinely informs decision-making. Field, agencies, independents, and clients will have all experienced these shifts differently, but one theme that we've heard consistently is the need to demonstrate the value of insight more clearly, more confidently, and more commercially.
Lost you.
Can you hear me? Is everyone still able to hear me?
We can hear you, Bex. Can everybody put themselves on mute, please, so as not to interrupt Bex?
Thank you. Great, wonderful. Anyway, as I was saying, the need to be able to demonstrate value commercially is something that was very strong last year. Looking ahead to 2026, the MRS sees a critical opportunity for the profession. As technology continues to reshape how research is conducted, our responsibility is to help the industry use it well. It will be about navigating change and change management, whether as a large agency or as an independent consultant, empowering practitioners with innovation that strengthens rather than undermines the quality of insight, protects research participants, and reinforces the role of evidence in society. And I can't look forward to 2026 without mentioning that MRS are celebrating a monumental milestone this year, their 80th anniversary. We are looking forward to celebrating this achievement with some fantastic events throughout the year. I'm reliably told that we share this birthday with Heathrow Airport, Pontins Holiday Park, and Dolly Parton. So I think we're in good company there. So that's a quick overview of last year and this year from an MRS perspective. Let's turn now to our fantastic panelists who each have their own unique take to share. Sam Gray is Managing Director at iView London and is a vocal advocate of face-to-face insight with experience across recruitment, qual and quant fieldwork, and interviewing and facility operations. And she's going to give us the field view of the landscape. Sarah Jenkins is founder and director of Magenta, a multi-award winning agency known for actionable client insights and storytelling. A regular event speaker, Sarah can give us the small to medium-sized agency view. And Stephen Darby, research manager at Leeds Building Society and vice chair of Aura, with more than a decade of client-side industry experience across both B2B and B2C. Stephen is here to share the all-important client-side viewpoint. So I hope you're all looking forward to this conversation. Hopefully we don't have any more technical issues. We're going to try and leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So please feel free to post those throughout the panel conversation and we'll come back to them at the end. So I've given my take on last year and what's coming next, but let's bring our panelists in. Sam, let's start with you. What stood out for you in 2025 and what are you seeing as we move into 2026?
I'll unmute myself. So from where I sit, 2025 has really felt like a year of recalibration and in many ways a bit of a waiting game. There's been a strong push for efficiency, speed and cost control, largely by AI and tighter budgets, and that's accompanied a growing concern around data quality, respondent integrity, and the depth of insight that we're actually getting. Looking ahead to 2026, I think we'll see a more deliberate hybrid model, blending technology and human presence, and a renewed focus on quality, trust, and accountability across the research supply chain.
Thank you, Sam. And Sarah, does that reflect what you've been seeing from an agency perspective?
Yeah, I think the word I've chosen for 2025 is resilience. We've really had to work hard. I think the small and medium agents, from our perspective, we've had to work really hard to win work. We've had to put a lot more work into working alongside our clients to help them almost get approval for the budget, for the project to get signed off. So it's taking longer for proposals to be signed off. We're having to just work really hard, harder than we probably had before. Alongside that, faster, quicker AI has loomed across everything we've done, and the questions have been relentless. Should we, shouldn't we? If we do, what do we use it for? If we don't, are we missing out? Are we going to lose it? Like, it creates opportunity and anxiety, really. You don't really know, what should we be doing it for? So that's been around. So I think looking forward, I think the shininess will come off of AI in the sense that we will start to understand and have more mature conversations about what it actually offers and what it lacks and what it doesn't offer. So I think we will, if you remember back to the metaverse, I mean, I remember a few years ago having this fear of like, oh my God, as a small agency, how on earth am I going to get the technology to be in the metaverse? And nobody talks about it anymore. And I think it's because it's found its role and its place. And I think AI will do the same. So I feel like we're going to see more mature conversations around AI. I think the insight professionals are going to be positioning themselves more as consultants. We are not just data gatherers. We are not just researchers anymore. We need to be adding that layer of human insight and that value of interpretation and the strategic guidance that our clients need. So we're going to be positioning ourselves more of strategists, consultants, and insight consult like that role rather than just researchers. But I do think that there is a little bit of a tension from a small, medium, large, so like the size of your agency. I think big agencies have got the financial pockets to invest and acquire AI and innovation. Small agencies, independents, we've got the ability to be a bit more agile. We've got less overheads. We can perhaps react. And there is a concern by some of my kind of contacts and peers who are in those medium size where they do have overheads, but they don't have the buckets of money. Where do they sit and what are they going to do? There's a little bit of concern from there about where they fit in. So that's kind of where I see sort of emerging a bit more this year.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, resilience is such a great word, isn't it, to describe last year and probably this year as well. Stephen, how do things land from the client side? What's your view on last year and moving into this year?
Yeah, so I think not too dissimilar to what Sarah said, really, is that it's this kind of, if we go back slightly further than last year, there was a huge panic on AI and whether that was going to take a lot of the lower client side jobs, entry level jobs, so that how are we going to kind of have researchers in the future, like then project 10 years into the future? It's like, how do we have those skills? How have they got them developed? But I think last year we saw a little bit more of a calming presence of AI, which I know is not a common phrase that we hear about AI, but actually it felt that we got through that initial, it's going to take over the whole thing. And actually, okay, there are some benefits here. We can see how it can strip out some of the time, but actually we're still going to require people know how to write a survey. We're still going to know people how to speak to customers or market participants or responders. So I think for me, it was a little bit more of a settling year. I kind of felt a little bit more comfortable, maybe from I don't know, I don't work for an agency, but maybe from a client side, it was less of a worry year. It was more of okay, this is what it can do for us potentially. And I think this year is going to be, how do we realize some of those benefits? I think the one thing that's different in AI, and again, I'm not professing to be the absolute expert, but I think one of the key differences for this is that it's, whilst we as researchers and insight specialists and insight professionals are using AI to do what we do, so are all of our internal stakeholders, which has never really happened before. They're learning this technology at the same rate, if not faster than we are. That's usually we're the experts in the room all the time. And I think this is the one element where I'm suddenly going, oh, hang on, they know a bit more about this AI technology than I do, and it's having to try and catch up, and whilst also trying to keep on top of all the other research developments in the research world that's happening. It's like, how do we make sure that we're not falling behind? And that's probably the unique approach for 2026 for me, is that it's kind of having my stakeholders be more advanced than me in particular areas, which doesn't usually happen when you're just trying to deliver a traditional piece of research.
Sure. Yes, and I'm sure AI will raise its head again later in the conversation. But let's just dig a bit deeper into some other topics rather than letting AI dominate as it tends to do. So data quality and fraud came up a bit there, and that it feels fair to say that that's something that was a big theme last year, and I don't think is going to go away this year. So Sarah, let's come to you. This isn't a new challenge for the industry, but it does seem to have intensified in recent years. What do you think is driving that, and how should we be responding to the whole data quality and fraud conversation?
I think there's an awful lot of work going on with the quant side and the quant panels addressing kind of bots and AI. There's an awful lot of work going on with the technology side of that. So I suppose if I think more from a kind of qualitative perspective, I think there's a couple of things. I think we as an industry, rely on finding good participants and ensuring that those participants are engaged and present and opening up within the research. And I think as clients are doing more and more face-to-face research, that conversation about professional participants has re-emerged. I was actually really surprised. I haven't heard about it or talked about it since the COVID, since we went online and everything went online. It seemed to just disappear as a topic. And I was sat in a client meeting just before Christmas, and they were commenting how they'd been out doing face-to-face research and seen the same participants in two different groups. They'd used two agencies in the same area doing different projects, same participants turning up. So that conversation around data quality and quality of participants, I think really has to be addressed. I think it's not going to go away, and yet we seem as an industry to kind of be burying our heads in the sand or unable to find a kind of collaborative solution. So I think we do need to address it. And I think part of the issue is that recruiters as a business operate within their business and their little silo, and they're not in any way individually blamed when somebody's giving them a response to a question. They're checking email addresses, they're checking, are you the customer of this, what have you. But I think we need a wider industry approach to this, and I would like to see the MRS kind of taking the lead on saying, what can we do, what are we going to do about addressing participants, professional participants. So I think there are solutions out there. People like Ada are putting solutions out there. They're trying to drag people in to kind of to have these conversations, but it feels like we're on the back foot at the moment, and I think we need to be a bit more proactive about managing that. But I also think as clients are asking more and more of us, and the expectations of what AI can deliver has sped up speed and quality and quantity, I think we're being asked more and more of things. So we are passing that on to our participants, and we're asking more and more of them. And I think we really need to be clear about the expectations of what we can expect from participants, or what the cost is if we want to ask them significantly more. So I think we either need to be pushing back on our clients and saying it's not reasonable to expect them to do 5 hours of writing in 2 days to give us their life story, or we say we absolutely can do that, but it's going to cost this and we'd need a bit more time or what have you. So those conversations need to be had two ways to make sure we are looking after and getting the best out of our participants. And that's on us as agencies to do that. So I think those are the kinds of things I'm throwing around. The other point I really just want to kind of throw in there is there's a wider sort of, if we're going to advocate for human value and the quality of strategic researchers and the insight that we bring, I am slightly nervous about the increasing number of non-researchers that are coming into our space. The technology, self-serve, res tech, private equity owned type people that are driven by very different metrics, very different quality standards, and not necessarily human insight. And that's flagging around for me as well. So they're probably the things I throw into the conversation of where we're facing.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, we know, you mentioned at the start, there has been a lot of focus from the various associations on the quant side, on the online quant, response to data quality and fraud. And certainly on the online quant side, it's rocketed. It's gone from something that maybe 5-10 years ago, or forever, we've always removed poor respondents, but from being maybe 5%, maximum 10%, to it's not unusual now to be removing upwards of 30%, 40%, even 50% sometimes. That's on the quant side, and there's various reasons for that on the quant side, but is it the same on the quant side? Has it increased at the same level, or is it kind of it's similar to what it's always been? We've never really addressed it, and we've never really found a solution.
I mean, I can remember back 20 years ago, no, maybe not that, 15 years ago, sat in the back room of a focus group with a mobile provider that were two mobile providers and merged. You can work out who that was. We were running focus groups for one of the brands, and the client was the insight lead for both. And as soon as somebody walked in, she said, but hold on, that person was in my group last week for the other provider that we'd just done, and they were that customer. And it's just something we've never addressed. We've kind of been a bit embarrassed about it, and we've dealt with it. We've asked people to leave the room, we've paid them off, what have you. But I don't think we have ever addressed it full on in terms of an industry-wide collaboration. I know that the recruiters are doing more and more. They are asking for more than, an email address, etc. But I think there's more that can be done. Whereas the email, we can have 5 email addresses, we can change our mobile phone, but you rarely change your bank account. So when we're now paying incentives, often through providers like Ada, it is a way in which their bank account is flagged then when they're being paid 10 times in 2 weeks for work they've done. So there are ways. I just think we haven't addressed it. I think we've been a bit embarrassed about it. We've tried to shuffle it under the carpet. I don't know that I'm seeing it any more than we used to.
Yeah.
It's just that it's reared its head again, having gone away for a little while, I think.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think it doesn't help when market research is often promoted as a way to get extra cash when you're earning money, that kind of thing. It doesn't help with the industry.
Yeah, and I think as well the rise in the scale of the problem for quant has made, and we'll come to Stephen in a bit, it's made clients more aware of it, so they're now looking across the board at more things, including face to face. But I mean, Sam, this is a perfect time to bring you in with all your expertise on it. Building on those data quality and fraud issues that Sarah's raised. I mean, what role does face-to-face research play to online? I mean, is the solution to kind of do more face-to-face, although it has challenges in getting rid of fraud, probably less so than online quant, which is faceless essentially. What are your thoughts on it, Sam?
I think face-to-face still really plays an important role, not everywhere and not all the time, but at the moments where confidence and trust and depth really actually matter. Online research has absolutely earned its place. It's fast, it's scalable, it opens up access in ways we couldn't have achieved before. But where face-to-face really adds value is how people engage and how insight forms and how confident teams feel about the actual outputs. And building on what Sarah said, I think about data quality and fraud, face-to-face introduces a different level of visibility and accountability. And obviously from a facility perspective, we physically see who turns up. That means that we can flag with the recruiter or the moderator that someone was in for a similar project the day before. We'll be checking IDs. We can manage the release of somebody who's maybe the client recognizes. And that real-time quality control becomes actually quite valuable when standards are under pressure. What worries me more is that we're starting to normalize distance. That's distance from participants, distance from field work, and distance from each other as researchers. And what then happens is quality doesn't collapse overnight, it kind of slowly erodes. And because the easier option and cheaper option becomes that default. And that's where the question becomes, are we consciously choosing our methods, or are we gradually letting quality erode because it's easier and cheaper in the moment? And trying to convince the end client to spend that little bit more and how that data is richer. And there's more younger researchers that have actually never been face-to-face. They've never experienced being in a viewing facility or being in an ethnography. And I think as well in a working context as well, because post working from home, we've created something like a disconnected environment, and that risks diluting the value of insight, because insight is formed through meaningful human connection. What we're seeing work really well in practice with our clients that have returned face-to-face, they're running a hybrid model where they're saying, well, we've got 8 groups to run, we're going to run 2 to 4 in person, and the rest we can do online, reach rural communities. And then that way they're getting depth and nuance in the in-depth in-person work. It's not about choosing one over the other. I think it's about getting a fuller picture. And this is something that we're all aware of. We're already seeing it. Agencies are actively stepping in to protect face-to-face capability. There's the Field Collaboration Group is a great example. It's agencies working together to rebuild interviewer numbers post-pandemic, but particularly in low coverage areas. And their aim is to grow face-to-face interviewer pools over the next few years. And because once that capability is lost, it's incredibly hard to recover. And that same thinking underpins the Power of Presence campaign, which is a collective of UK viewing facilities. We're asking whether it's being intentional enough about when human presence really matters. It's not about anti-AI or anti-online. It's about a balance and adapting without losing the people and the skills and the environment. So for me, face-to-face, it still adds value where confidence, nuance, and shared understanding are critical. And the real challenge is making those choices consciously rather than by default.
Yeah, and I guess, as you say, it is about, it's about that communication about commercial benefits again with clients and helping them to get that right balance, because of course there are huge pros around being able to do some things remotely. It's a big thing for accessibility. It improves our ability to be more representative in underrepresented groups sometimes, but yeah, not used the whole time. So Stephen, there's lots of different things that we would like to talk to you about with from the client perspective, but just could you quickly give us what's the client viewpoint on this whole conversation around data quality and fraud? As I mentioned, it feels as if clients are much more aware of it, and they are asking more questions about it. But how much kind of soul searching is going on by the clients, or is it something that you kind of think that this is really not our responsibility? What's the view on data quality?
I think there's definitely a greater understanding. That's a given, that people are much more conscious of it, and I think you hear it in the research world and you hear it in the non-research world, things like X and Twitter and all those things. There's just a much more awareness of bots and fake responses and all that stuff. So I think that we've landed that message that it's a problem. I think it is fair to say that most clients, I can't speak for every single client, but most clients, and then the people I've spoken to, would say this problem needs to be fixed by the agencies. Now, that's not to say that the clients can't recognize there needs to be some increased investment to allow the agencies to fix that problem, whether that be investment kind of financial, or whether that be extending the length of field work to allow for some of those problems to be ironed out and worked through. But if we as clients commission a piece of work, there's an expectation, and based on picking the right partners and assuming that they're all good, and that's why we're working with you, there's an expectation that those third-party research agencies are delivering what we've asked for, and there's always been a little bit of a problem, like you said right at the start, Rebecca. There's always been a few percent here or there, so that is we can accept that. But I think if we're talking now about an approximately 30% of responders, there is an expectation, certainly from a client side, that the research partners are removing that. And I was buying a new computer, I would expect it to work. I would expect it to be the computer that I was buying, or whatever that service is, you would expect it to deliver the thing that you've asked for. So I do think from a client's point of view, it sits with the agency to resolve, whilst we recognize that there are some trade-offs for that, which is probably time or cost. And then from the qual side of things, I think the face-to-face, when you sit down in a room like this or a discussion like this, it becomes abundantly clear that face-to-face is a good idea. I think what clients need the help with is telling that message and landing that message to stakeholders and finance teams who are signing off the cost for these things, because invariably it is more expensive than doing it online. It requires probably more than one event or two events. If you can do online, you can have people from all over the country join one group, whereas that obviously isn't the case if you're doing, or it could be, but it's far more costly to do that if you're doing that face-to-face, so it requires a few more events. So I think there is probably a joined up piece that we all need to get together on and kind of talk through how we can start to land the message that actually face-to-face really does matter, and what extra benefits it's landing, because I think we are in a position where that is going to get harder and harder land that message while finances get tighter and tighter.
Sarah, do you think that's fair enough in terms of the data quality expectation? Is it's the agency's responsibility?
I think it is fair enough from a client's perspective that it's on us, but actually I don't think it's on us. I think it's on the MRS and the recruiters. So I think we would pass that. I think it's more our responsibility than yours. You tell me what you need as a client. It is my responsibility to go and get it. And what the industry is doing about it, but what I as an agency can do about the quality of my participants is limited. And I think we do need a more cohesive approach as an organisation, as an industry, to dealing with it. So I'm kind of I'm accepting some responsibility, but I'm slightly passing the buck on that. I think in terms of convincing stakeholders of the power of face-to-face, I'd probably push back up to you on that, Stephen, in the sense of as a client working in Insight, I would hope that the Insight team understand the value of face-to-face and actually can have that conversation with stakeholders about why and how. So I guess I'm pushing back a little bit on that one in the sense of, yeah, I will happily help and I will give you a whole ream of reasons for you to go and have that conversation. But I feel like it's probably a conversation for the Insight team to have with the stakeholders, not with the agencies to have with the stakeholders about the power of face-to-face. But having said that, when we are submitting proposals to clients, we are writing face-to-face where we feel it is the best approach. And then we are it happened very recently, just getting an immediate email back going, and what would the cost be of it online? So we're kind of, and then it's like, well, we wouldn't do that many people in a group. We wouldn't do this. We wouldn't, what have you. So it kind of changes a bit. So I think I'm looking to my Insight partners, my client Insight partners, to work together, but I feel like it leans more on you for those stakeholder conversations. So I'll take a bit of the responsibility for the data quality if clients can take a bit more responsibility for pushing for the value of face-to-face.
I think that's probably happening. I agree with that totally. I think what the point I was really meaning is more that when somebody comes back and says, what's the cost of doing it online? I think it's helpful for the agencies then provide a negative cost as well. So it'll save you a couple of £1,000s, whatever that number is, but it's also going to lose you X, Y, and Z. And I think it's those kind of joined up conversations constantly happening that kind of really demonstrate how, you might save a few quid, but you're going to lose some real quality. I think it's that constantly closing that loop that really helps.
Yeah.
And again, as I said at the start, I think that is a skill, that we all need to kind of improve, is again that communication of the commercial benefit of the things that we're suggesting. Just to wrap up on the data quality issue, there's been some mention of MRS. So I can highly recommend. So MRS are part of the Global Data Quality Initiative, which is a joint association initiative alongside SMR, alongside Insights Association in the US, and alongside lots of other associations. And they are working very hard on lots of resources and solutions to fraud. There is a specific working group within that is dedicated to just looking at qualitative fraud. So you can find lots of resources and things on the website. You can link to the GDQ website from the MRS website, or you can just go straight to the GDQ website. But there are lots of resources on there, as I said, so that would be worth everyone looking at. But let's move on, as we said. So Steve, let's come to you for something slightly different now. So let's try and talk about Insight integration into business. We're very lucky to have you with us today, so let's make the most of you. Do you think there are any fundamental differences when it comes to Insight integration as we move from last year into this year, or are we looking to be managing many of the same concerns, do you think?
So I think absolutely largely it is not that different. I think most people who work in trying to integrate Insight into their business in any way, it is the same set of problems. I think there's always going to be the spectre of AI leaning large now over all of the things that we do. And going back to what I said earlier, the fact that the pace of the organization is as fast, if not faster, than the Insight function, that probably adds a new level of something different to consider for 2026 and how we mitigate that, trying to keep people in line with realistic expectations. So just because it's faster or just because it can do some of it doesn't mean it's necessarily the right solution every time. A little bit like what we're saying about online versus face-to-face. Just because you can do the online stuff faster than the face-to-face doesn't mean it's the right solution. And I think it's very much the same with the AI. If it is adding some value and it's going to make the piece of research better, then great. But I don't see it as being the only solution. Whereas I think some of your stakeholders, not just at Leeds Building Society, but external to that, start to see AI in their day-to-day lives and start to think, oh, well, if I can do this on that, why can't I do that on that? And start using AI to try and gather some insight themselves, or using and trying to bring in this insight that hasn't been there's no parameters around it. There's no kind of guardrails around fake responses or incorrect understanding. And there's a real worry there that people start to go off and go, oh, I've got the insight already without even checking in with the insight team. And I think that is probably something that's new. It's new in scope and size for 2026. I know there's always been the chance that somebody will go and try and find their own research, but I think it's far easier for them to do that now with the openness and access for AI. And I think that's where we need to be careful. And I know there's a lot of really good AI projects out there. This is not me like as an anti-AI stance. I'm very keen to explore some of them myself, but it's how they are built and how they are used and how they take real responders' attitudes and real responders' responses to build the models and build the responses to the AI. So I think that is definitely a unique problem for 2026 and probably the 27 and 28 and 29 and 30 and so on and so forth. But I think it's definitely a next year problem. The other stuff I think is largely the same. It's how are you using your research? What is the piece of research going to deliver? How getting stakeholders to kind of have an end point in mind, not just doing it to sit it on a shelf, because I think none of us want to do that. I think that's the most frustrating thing as a researcher, is you do the research and then someone says thank you and then you see nothing else from it. That's always been a problem. We're all still going to have to make sure that there's something to do with it at the end. There is an action, or we're going to drive that kind of action. That hasn't changed in the 10 years I've been in the industry, and it probably won't change for the next 10. So that's always going to be there. I think there's engagement with partners has definitely got better. I don't know if this is across the board, but it seems like there's much more engagement with research partners and stakeholders over the last few years than there used to be. Those relationships used to be very much arm's length from each other, and actually it was all come through the insight team, whereas now there's a kind of a much more eagerness to share that relationship. And I think that really helps embed the insight, because you feel like the stakeholders feel more invested. And that's certainly something I would always recommend, is to try and keep your stakeholders close to the overall conversations, whilst not abdicating any responsibility from the insight team, but just bringing people along for more of the conversation than we have done in the past. And I certainly felt like that was something I was hearing a bit more was happening in 2025 with kind of a lot of the conversation I'm having at Aura and just in my day-to-day interactions with other client side organizations, a lot more of that. And then I think that there's a need for people to be honest about what the research is answering and what it can't answer. And I think that is something that is absolutely essential to making sure that your insights land and can be integrated. If people can trust what it tells them, it's fine to tell them what it doesn't tell them as well. And I think there's a real need to do that, because if that means that we need to do a little bit more or a little bit extra or a new piece completely to kind of fix another problem that we've uncovered during the research, I think that is fundamental. But again, I don't think that's new for 2026. I think that's something that was 2025 and it is all the time. But I think they are key requirements that happens. And then the one extra thing I've noticed for 2026, and again, it might just be in my world and the conversations I'm having, but I'm seeing there's a lot more need for agencies to collaborate with each other. And particularly, I think Sarah, it was something you said about the development of AI, and that actually, how can you keep pace with some of these huge technological developments of the big research agencies or the companies that have really gone into specialize in this stuff. And I think this year we'll see a need from client side for those companies to work together a bit more, because actually we want to be able to go to Magenta and get the quality that we know we're going to get from Magenta and the robustness and that kind of relationship you built up. But then we also I can't stop stakeholders and the business progressing and wanting stuff that is supported by AI. So I think there's going to be a need for that. And again, I think that feels quite different in 2026, that on particularly that point, I'm not saying agencies have never collaborated before, that's not new, but on this particular use of somebody's technology to kind of support the overall stakeholder client side, I think that's going to be something different for 2026, and we'll probably see a lot more of that, I think.
Interestingly, in conversation with some of my colleagues who run medium-sized agencies, one of them said her word for 2026 is partnerships.
Yeah.
Agency and supplier partnerships, and she's out having conversations with lots of people to basically establish what have you got, what have you got, what have you got, what have you got, so that they can be working together when the right briefs come up.
Sam,
Yeah, definitely.
let's bring you back in, Sam. What was there anything there that Stephen said that kind of resonates with you? You know, how is AI kind of impacting your work? I mean, completely differently, I would imagine, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually quite pro AI. I'm pretty good friends with my ChatGPT. I'm so aware though that it is predisposed to be positive in anything that I'm asking. So, you know, okay, there's bigger agencies that are building their own models, so hopefully they can kind of dilute the positivity out and get a more unbiased view. But I don't know, I'm seeing it in years' time. We've fed these machines with people's data, and then in 2, 3, 4 years, we're actually recycling the same data, and we're then creating data from AI. It's not actually people that we're creating the data from. At the facility, we're using AI with our web streaming. We have AI transcripts now, but I find even clients have the AI transcripts come through, and they're really good. They're like 98, 99% pretty perfect, but they always say, can we pay for somebody to actually just go over these and make sure everything is good? And it's the right speaker, or it's got the right intonation. So yeah, it's about using it as a tool rather than letting it take over our jobs.
Yeah. And I think, you know, both Sarah and Stephen kind of touched on this, is the need, you know, we hear a lot of people talk about the human in the loop, right? But MRS, you know, they prefer to say it has to be the professional in the loop. You have to know what it is that you're doing, you know. And I hear a lot of arguments for AI talking about, oh, it's democratizing this or it's democratizing that. But I think that there can be a real danger in that, can't there? You know, it's Stephen, as you were saying, if someone who doesn't really know what they're doing suddenly thinks they can go and just access this and then that's their insight, then that is a real danger. And I think hiding behind, oh, democratizing, I'm like, well, that's not necessarily a good thing. I wouldn't want to democratize brain surgery. Do you know what I mean? You know, you do need to be a professional involved in this to know how to use the tools and to analyze and the insight. But you know, Sarah, I don't know if you kind of agree that it's both the hero and the villain a lot of the times, isn't it? But you know,
It is, yeah, which is my point about, I think, this year having much more mature conversations about it. You know, I don't want this whole conversation this whole year to be dominated by AI in the way that last year was, because I'm already bored of it. I think it has a role to play. I think we can learn from it and we can use it. But I do think we will see more mature conversations this year about how and where and why. And everybody's accepting it has a place. We're all acknowledging it. I think it's also about transparency. Agencies have a accountability to tell clients when they are using it. So that might be just in automated transcripts. I know a lot of agencies that are using a particular AI tool to write top line summaries and thematic reviews, etc. And they're not telling clients, they're just selling it as they would have done usually. And I think that's where I think there needs to be transparency and honesty about how we're using it. And that's what I think will come this year. I think we'll just become a bit more savvy and a bit more open and a bit more accepting of where we can use it. It's a tool, it's a helpful tool, but it is also, you know, it's not as good. You know, we were very fortunate just before Christmas to do a project where we literally did like for like with the client. We had a discussion guide, they've built an agent. We put the discussion guide and the stimulus into humans and we did it in AI, and we had a workshop comparing the notes, and it was fascinating to see how AI deals with the data and what it does. and the learnings from that. So I do think it's the villain and the hero.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot more we can do. Like, we can see the added value of it. And let's say, we are adding that strategic insight. We are adding that layer of interpretation. We're adding the so what, which helps our clients to make sense of it all and to disseminate it and use it. It's all very well and good saying, here's the data that AI has given us, but that's the same as us being data collectors and researchers. As I said right at the very beginning, we're no longer just data collectors and going, here's what I got told, go away, do with it. Our role is interpretation, strategic development, etc., and helping stakeholders and clients to use it and move forward with it.
Yeah, and I think again, touching on what you said, Sam, around if we're asking these questions of AI, it's going to be more important, this access to primary data and really high quality, going back to the quality. If we are going to start synthesizing insight potentially, we're still going to need a constant pipeline of really high quality primary fresh data that the algorithms can learn from. Otherwise it's stale data, and again, that quality issue is going to just become more and more important. So I can see we've had a question from Annabelle. Hi, Annabelle, which I'll just put in now because, Stephen, I think it's directly related to what you were just talking about. So I'll just put this out now to you, Stephen. So Annabelle says, are there areas where you see stakeholders more likely to replace research with AI, and areas where they realise AI isn't going to cut it and want fresh research? That's a question from Annabelle for you, Stephen.
So I can't say that I've seen it happen yet. I think what will start to happen is where people look for industry reports. I think that's when it'll start to come in. So people will start to look at what have we seen before, and trying to get summaries from existing reports rather than necessarily new stuff initially. And I think it's as that confidence, well, I say confidence, but as that perceived confidence in what they're finding grows, there'll be a view that they can then say, oh, actually, I'll find some new stuff that I don't know about. So I think initially it will just start softly on using their own areas of expertise and start to build up, just get access to more stuff that exists in the wider world. But I can't profess to say I've seen it yet, but that's my views of what's going to come in 2026, that people start to just build on as I said right at the start, it's building on their own experiences and knowledge of this, of what AI is, and the fact that they're using it already. It just kind of naturally would play into then using it into their work-based question. I don't think it's necessarily even a fundamental decision to exclude the insight function. It's just, oh, I'll go and have a look, see if I can get this. Oh, I've got it. I don't need to ask the insight team anymore or the insight function because I've got this answer already. I think that's where it will be a problem for us to try, and we don't know if people are doing that themselves without hearing the conversation. So I think that's where it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sorry, Annabelle, did you want to come on camera and just give your thoughts on that response from Stephen? I can't see if you're...
Hi, Bex. Hi, Stephen. Hi, everyone. How are you doing? Hi, Sarah. Hi, Sam. Nice to see you all. And have a bit of sensible conversation in the crazy that is already 2026. Woo-hoo. Now, I think that's really interesting, and I think it sounds like a really sensible thing for them to be doing if they are actually maximizing what they've already got before they ask us to do things, and we end up reinventing the wheel and telling them things that they already know. So that seems like a reasonable sort of use of budget. But I just really wondered whether you were starting to see points at which they were replacing sort of primary research for trying to see what they can find out for themselves. So yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Annabelle. Lovely to see you. So we've got just under 10 minutes left. Sally, I saw Annabelle's, but I haven't been watching the chat. Sorry.
There's been a lot of feedback. Actually, I noticed that Luca's on here, and there was a question for Luca earlier on that I skimmed through, where people were asking about what are the trends on the other side of the channel, really, in terms of the balance. What was the question? I remember seeing it. Who asked that question of Luca? Somebody definitely asked a question of Luca.
Hi, I did, Sally. I just asked Luca because we're looking at Hi, Luca. Hi, everyone. I think you can see me. Hello. Yeah, I asked a question of Luca whether he's seeing the same thing in terms of, because we're talking about face-to-face being a lot more in the UK, that people want that. Is that the same trends that they're seeing in Italy? Because I know from other agencies I've spoken to that they're asking for focus groups to be completely online, and they prefer online rather than face-to-face.
Yeah, I can confirm that, Paul. It's really becoming less common from my point of view to see requests for face-to-face. Meeting people it is costly, and you get requests for that just when there are some secrecy around the product they wanted to test, so they don't like that to be put online. They like you to show them physically and bring it away with you, so not leaving there with them anything. So that's the only situation where I can report. But then I may have a limited point of view here. I must be honest. Recent months have been quite tough around here, so not really been much involved with field activities. There have been much requests for field activities. So my concern with AI, it's really that it may take over even the moderation side of it. I don't know. I'm not sure. So thank you for the question, and thank you for the time.
Sorry, I dropped you in it there, Luca, a bit, I'm afraid. Does anybody else have any more questions that they would like to ask our panelists while we've got them? We've got about 5 minutes left. Or anybody add a comment?
I don't have a question, but I do have an observation, and I'd be interested in the panelists' perspective on this, because I'm hearing a lot of anti about online focus groups, and frankly, 90% of the work that I've done over the last 5 years has been over Zoom. And if they're handled well, I think you can get 99% as good learning from them. One of the great advantages of them, though, is that clients watch almost all my groups now. And back in the day, they would just watch a couple of them. And what that's done is it's highlighted to them the difference between what people say and what we do with what people say. And I think this is a really key issue, because part of the danger of in-housing research through AI technologies and so on is that AI basically tells you what people say. It scrapes what people say. It doesn't interpret meaning and extrapolate from that based on experience. And the brilliant thing I found over the last 5 years of having clients watch so many of my groups is that they come away from watching the groups thinking they know what the answer is. Then I go do a debrief and they go, blimey, I didn't see that. Okay. So for the first time, the black box of analysis and interpretation has been opened. So I actually think there's been a benefit, certainly from my perspective, from actually clients watching more and therefore seeing the difference that the researcher, a skilled, experienced, analytical researcher, makes to the findings.
There's an interesting comment from Howard, who clearly is against online, but he says you can still watch an in-person group using streaming, so clients can be encouraged to observe, even if it's face-to-face. Although obviously there are costs associated with that. Any other questions, anyone? Well, we've still got a couple of minutes left.
I think Graham wanted to hear from the panel, so I'll just come back on Graham's point, if that's all right. From a client side, I would agree that the adoption of online focus groups and discussions with customers and market samples has definitely opened up access to stakeholders internally, and there's far more frequency of people attending and watching or watching back if they're recorded than there was when we used to do for face-to-face. You would very much get the interested stakeholder would attend the face-to-face ones, but I think that it definitely opens up access far more easily. That's not to say you shouldn't have them, but that's definitely a switch I've seen, that having the online ones allows that access more frequently.
Any other comments? Any other input?
Well, I'm biased. I think you miss a lot in a camera. So I don't know what your hands are doing right now. I don't know whether you're on your phone. I don't know if I've got your attention. And I don't think that we as people can really connect with each other through a screen.
Yeah, I would challenge. I don't think online groups get 90, 98, 99, whatever you said. I don't think we get quite that far. I do think there's a lot missed by not being in person. But I too, Graham, love that moment when I walk into a client and present my work and tell them something new and different from the analysis and the insight and the years of experience that shows them how to interpret data in a way that might be slightly different to reportage, which is what they've taken away. So I too love that moment. But I do think you get much. But it's not also just what you see. It is also the bonding of the participants. That for me is the biggest thing. So when you're online and they're talking one at a time, and whether they're giving you their attention or not is one thing. But actually, the number of groups I've done in person where they have felt it to be a therapy session, which meant that they open up more and they're sharing numbers with each other before they leave. I had one group who agreed to meet same time next week in Asda Cafe because they just enjoyed the process and loved meeting all these other people. And it was actually a topic about how you meet new people. So them being in a room with new people, they thought they were being paid to meet new friends. It was great. So that's what I miss, is actually that joy of the bonds you make with people and the laugh. We all know the golden nuggets come out after the cameras have gone off and when people are walking out of the room and they're taking that's where it happens. And that's what I miss. I miss those kind of friendly, bantery conversations with participants after you've got through the formal stuff. That's where I feel that golden nugget comes out, and that's what I think's missed.
And I think clients that come here definitely feel those golden nuggets in the back room as well, because they're all bonding, they're brainstorming straight after it, they're all enthused about it. As soon as one client comes here, they're constantly coming again. So it's about convincing your end clients that you need to build it into the work that you're doing, even if it's just one group.
And I think to build on what Sarah was just saying, the loss of spontaneity means that great ideas can be quashed, or comments that lead to an insight can be quashed because you're waiting, because you're asking, X to speak and then Y to speak and then it's Z's turn. And by that time, they might have lost whatever the thought was. So I think we're in danger of losing that with online groups as well.
Okay, great. Well, unless anybody has any last comments, we've run out of time today. So I think it's just up to me to say thank you very much to Bex, first of all, for hosting and for running the panel for us, and also to our amazing panelists, Sarah, Steve and Sam, for taking part and entertaining us for this past hour. So it's been a really interesting discussion. Clearly lots of challenges ahead for 2026, but also opportunities. And it sounds like in many areas we're sort of reaching a more mature phase, whether that be getting the balance right in terms of use of AI or the balance in terms of face-to-face versus online. So yeah, it's an interesting discussion. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for logging in today and listening in. Hopefully it's given you food for thought for the coming year. Do join us again soon on another ICG event, and have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye all.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.